Rachel Nichols, joined here by just a couple of NBA champions. Kendrick Perkins, Richard Jefferson.
It sure is quiet in here today.
Why are you quiet?
I'm just saying, it is. It's quiet.
I can't even tell if that's a dig at Suns fans or a dig at Richard.
It's probably both, but mainly Suns fans because...
mainly you, probably.
Yeah, probably me, but it's cool. It's cool.
So Richard came out on yesterday's show and made a big deal that with the Suns up 3-1, he was getting out on a limb and he's going to pick them to win the series.
No. Win the whole thing. Not just the series. Don't limit it. The whole thing.
He's brave. He's very brave.
Yes.
We will discuss Paul George's performance shortly, but first, so in movies, we are used to characters that just won't die. Michael Myers from Halloween, Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator, Han from Fast and the Furious, which I'm actually pretty happy about. But anyway, you can now add the Clippers to that list. In series after series, round after round, LA just keeps coming like a pack of zombies. We saw it last night once again here in Phoenix, interrupting what could have been a storybook moment for the Suns. Certainly the same stage seemed pretty set for Phoenix to roll. The Clippers are not only still missing their best player in Kawhi Leonard, they suffered yet another big injury blow prior to the game, losing their starting center. The Clips were also playing their 18th game in 38 nights. But meanwhile, the Suns still chipper after having a week-long rest before this series, and frankly, it all seemed to be coming together for a Phoenix team looking to advance to its first NBA Finals in nearly 30 years. And for Chris Paul, the most accomplished player of his generation, to have not yet reached that promised land. Except none of that happened as the Clippers once again rose from the dead. Marcus Morris was just sensational at the start, pacing the Clippers out to a 20-5 lead. From there on, we saw contributions from DeMarcus Cousins, from Reggie Jackson, from Patrick Beverley. Pat Bev, by the way, was in full-on Pat Bev mode last night, most notably after this collision with Chris Paul in the third quarter. CP hits the deck, and I suppose Pat thought Chris was milking the moment because he started imitating and making fun of the fall. That got a lot of attention from the arena crowd, but frankly, it was really a sideshow to the real main event that was developing in the second half, which was Paul George absolutely, positively going off in a way that, frankly, should not have been really possible. PG leads the NBA in minutes this postseason, and not by a little bit. He has played 735 minutes, 130 more than any other player. That's insane. And keep in mind how hard-earned every one of those minutes has had to be, given the defensive attention Paul has attracted since Kawhi went out. And yet, there was PG cashing in shot after shot, answering every time Phoenix tried to make a run. By the time he was done, he had 41 points total, 30 in the second half alone, a half in which he shot 83% from the field. The performance was more than enough to help the Clippers stave off elimination. But don't just take my word for it. Look at the company that PG joined last night. That is just flat out star stuff, and it reinforced just how long past time it is to let go of the PG slander that's been circulating around the league for longer than anyone should want to admit. No, Paul George is not perfect. No, he is not the greatest or most clutch player of his generation. But people, that's not the bar. The choice is not, are you the best or do you suck? There needs to be room to appreciate someone who can clearly flat out hoop, who, yes, sometimes falls, but then always gets up and emerges tougher. After the game, ESPN's Om Youngmisuk asked PG if he feels he gets picked on more than other players.
I do, and it's the honest truth. It's a fact, but I can't worry about that. I'm beyond that. You know what I mean? I'm beyond that. I am who I am. I wish I could shoot 80%, 75% on a nightly basis, but it's not realistic. But what I can do is do everything else. And so it is what it is. They can judge me on what they want to. That part don't matter to me. I'm gonna go out there and hoop and give everything I got.
I don't know where this trolling bull has come from, where it's the internet controls the narrative about these players. It's becoming foolish, man. Like I said earlier in the year, that's one of the most special players to ever lace his shoes up. Get this dude his flowers, man. I don't understand the slander. It's becoming quite silly now. Like, respect these players, man. Respect these greats.
Paul George should get his respect for all he has done this postseason. And look, I don't know how much longer he can keep doing it, frankly, or how long the whole team can keep doing it. At some point, the injuries and the minutes and the travels, the laws of physics say it should eventually be too much. Then again, the laws of physics don't explain how a guy can survive a fireball consuming his car on the streets of Tokyo. Hey, worked for Han, and maybe, just maybe, it can work for PG and the Clippers too. Guys, a little F9 there.
I'm okay with Han.
Had to go there. The Clippers find themselves just 2 wins away from their first finals appearance in franchise history after PG's huge game last night. Richard, do you feel he has silenced the doubters with his performance in these playoffs?
Yes, and the thing that I find most impressive is the fun part for me is looking at the totality of his whole career. This is the Indiana Paul George. This is who he believes he was. And when you saw some of the struggles, it was because he was paired next to another superstar, whether it was Russell Westbrook or Kawhi Leonard. And I think at times he would defer, then he would lose some of his rhythm. He wouldn't be that same aggressive player that we saw so much earlier in his career. But now, when you just put it on him and you say, hey, go lead us, he does an absolute phenomenal job. And this is the Paul George. And I think some of the criticism is because when you saw it in Indiana, this is what you expected for the rest of his career because he did it so early and battled against Titans like, you know, the Miami Heat and all that. So I think that he is silencing his doubters, but ultimately I think he's in a different situation than he's been in prior times.
Well, I think that, you know, look, Paul George is playing phenomenal right now. And I just want to address the part where he was talking about he gets unfair criticism or more criticism than any other player. But he put himself under this microscope. He the one that gave himself a nickname called Playoff P. So you got to perform like it because now we're watching you. It's the same thing with Damian Lillard when he says Dame time. We know he's going to give us a historical performance. Kevin Durant, back when he was with Golden State, and he said, you know who I am. I'm KD.
Right.
And he came out and he murdered the Clippers, right? So at the end of the day, he put himself in this position. But I will say this, right? Since Kawhi Leonard went out, Ty Lue told me he had a meeting with Paul George, and he said, hey, man, when I go to the steakhouse, I don't just want appetizers. I want the filet, I want the sides, I want everything, meaning I want you to be aggressive. I want you to give it everything you got. I don't care if you go 0 for 20. I want you to go down swinging. And what I'm seeing out of Paul George is he's entering his name right back into the word superstar because he's averaging 30 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists since Kawhi's been out, and he's been playing phenomenal. But most importantly, he's been coming up when it matters the most.
Look, I just wonder, is there room for a middle ground? Like, can we just have not the talk radio take of either he's terrible or he's the best ever? When talking about Paul George, I feel like people start like, well, so-and-so did this. I'm like, right, but so-and-so is a top 5 all-time NBA player.
Great. I'm with him. I do think Paul George gets some unnecessary, especially in the regular season. Like you have an off night. It's like the same people that are running to criticize him aren't the people that are running to congratulate him. That being said, some of the losses that they had last year in the bubble, the way that they played against Oklahoma City, the way they played against Utah, those were 3 consecutive year bad losses. So that's accumulation of something. So I'm with you.
There's got to be room for.
There is.
He's not the greatest of all time. No, he's not the greatest of all time.
No, he's very, very, very.
That's okay. That doesn't have to be the standard. I did want to ask because we were talking about this in Perk. I want to get your thoughts. Richard and I were talking post game about a stretch in the fourth quarter where Paul George. I thought, okay, this is it. He's running out of gas, and it was pretty brilliant how the rest of the team kind of picked him back up.
Yeah, no, what I saw here is look, he had a couple of kind of loose turnovers, and look, you could just see him not getting back on defense. And this is not like you saw with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant was exhausted.
Yep.
And then you see Paul George. This man is doing every single thing he could do. But what I noticed with T. Lue and what a lot of people don't see, right after this 3 consecutive plays, crowd's going crazy. T. Lue calls a post up for Morris. Morris goes and posts up, takes his time. But a lot of people were like, oh, why are they posting up Morris right now? And it's like, because Paul George needs a break. And sometimes he got a 24-second break where he just got to stay in the corner, let Morris go to work. And when players like that deliver, when you have Morris or Pat Beverly or Reggie Jackson deliver in those moments, it gives superstars a break, and then Paul George closed that game.
To be honest, this is the way I feel about Paul George, right? Whether the Clippers win this series, whether he plays well throughout the rest of the postseason, I don't even care. He's earned my respect because he's laying it out on the line. When you see a guy that's exhausted like that, it reminds me of Delly. You remember Dellavedova?
Yeah.
When he had to get carried off the court, I think it was like Game 3 of the NBA Finals, and they had to take him to the emergency room and put an IV in him.
Yeah.
This is what PG is doing, and I love to see it, but this is the Paul George that we've been waiting on, we've been wanting to see, and he's getting his moment, and I love it. Ty Lue has put that key into his back. And what you said, RJ, about him getting those 24 seconds of rest, for the first time, I saw Ty Lue animated on the sideline, and he got mad at his team down the stretch. He said, run the play again, meaning go back to Paul George. He was milking Paul George to death towards the end of the game, and I love every minute of it.
Yeah.
Again, Paul George has played 735 minutes
games
in this playoffs.
God bless him.
130 minutes more than any other player. That's not an excuse. It is just a fact. And the fact that he has not run out of gas yet is something that, again, got to salute him for. I do want to get to what happened back to what happened in the third quarter, right, with Pat Bev and the flagrant foul on Chris Paul. It went to a video review. The refs took a close look at this one. Here's what Monty Williams had to say on the play after the game.
Some of the stuff that's happening is just, it is what it is. But when a guy does that kind of stuff consistently, what do you say as a coach? I can call the league. I can talk to, the officials in the NBA. It doesn't do anything until something's done about it. Those kinds of plays are dangerous. You know what I mean?
All right, so Perk, what did you think of the flagrant call on that play? I thought it was interesting that the guys in the booth, the guys broadcasting the game, didn't seem to think it was a flagrant, and Steve Javie came on the broadcast and said he didn't think it was a flagrant, but clearly Monty Williams did, and I can tell you the Suns fan in the arena certainly did.
Well, I did too, and I'm a little younger than those guys that are way in the booth and Steve Javie, so maybe, their eyesight is starting to go away because of their age, but that was a clear flagrant. Look, this is not football. This is a chop block, and even in the NFL, look, this is illegal.
No, I'm not even going to let you finish this nonsense. I'm not even there's not a flagrant foul. You know why Chris Paul wasn't upset? Because Chris Paul jumped to the right. Chris Paul jumped to the right.
He jumped.
Look, he did jump. What I'm saying, though, is that's how guys are getting fouls, Perk. That's why they're talking about changing the rule. You have Trae Young when he gets no, listen, Perk, let me finish there.
First of all, I was the one that was
it's okay, let me finish.
Really
I was interrupted. You weren't saying anything.
I was.
When Trae Young gets a guy behind him, he will jump backwards and then throw a shot. That's what they're trying to eliminate. Chris Paul, right there in that moment, as Patrick Beverly is trying to come, Chris Paul jumps to the right. You can literally see it in slow motion. He jumps to the right to draw the cut. Look, that's not a natural shot motion.
RJ.
Up and down and forward is a natural shot motion. That's not a flagrant. I'm sorry,
RJ, whether he jumped to the right, whether he jumped to the left.
You got to give the defender space.
Whether he did the cha-cha slide, I really don't care. At the end of the day, that was not a basketball play.
It wasn't.
Why was he around his legs? Why was Patrick Beverly around the leg area?
Okay, you haven't ever gone around screens as a big man, and that is no disrespect.
I know it.
When you're trying to, you make yourself as small as possible. You turn and you're trying to navigate the screen. Now, when a player jumps backwards into you, he's elevated your level. I'm just showing you.
I know how to get up over the screen.
No, you don't. Point being is this, Rach. There's a reason why they're going to change the rule. There's a reason why the rules committee are having these conversations, because that right there, Chris Paul almost hurt himself trying to draw the foul. If you look at it in slow motion, Chris Paul doesn't jump up, doesn't jump. He jumps to the right as Patrick Beverly's coming. So that's what takes out his legs. That's why the people in the booth were upset, because they had the replay.
Rachel, you know how sometimes you want to get away from your kids because they get on your nerves in the house? Well, it's the other way around with RJ.
You want to go back home?
No, his kids are happy when he leaves.
What are you laughing back there for?
We will survey.
Producers laughing?
We will survey RJ's two tiny children at some point later in the Jump run. I do want to get to Trae Young. We're going to talk about